Digital marketing is one of the most powerful ways to promote your brand in 2024, but it can also be one of the most powerful ways to hurt your brand in the modern age. My name is Alex. I'm a digital marketer and copywriter with Lover Fighter Writer, and today I'm going to go through 5 of the worst digital marketing fails of 2024. I made a similar video to this for 2023. I'll put the link to that in the description. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 examples plus a bonus example of brands or properties that had everything going for them, had massive marketing budgets, and absolutely failed to deliver with that marketing. And a big part of some of these stories is product market fit as well as public relations, but there's also a marketing component to all of them. If you find this video helpful or enjoyable, I hope that you'll like, subscribe, share it with someone else who would enjoy it. And now let's get into the worst marketing fails of 2024. The first example is definitely an example of poor marketing, but even more than that, it shows poor public relations, a poor product market fit, and really just a poor understanding of what your audience wants. And so if you are someone who consumes a lot of entertainment content on YouTube, you might already be familiar with this, but this is a story about the YouTube channel called Watcher, which to my understanding is a very big, very successful YouTube channel that creates high quality entertainment content. However, in early 2024, they announced that they would no longer upload their main content to YouTube, and that instead they would be launching their own streaming service app where all of their new content would go, and it would cost $6 a month or $60 a year. Now, if you're a YouTuber or if you've worked in the entertainment industry, you're probably already facepalming, because building a brand around providing free entertainment, such as uploading videos on YouTube, and then expecting a significant portion of your fan base to be okay with suddenly paying $6 a month for the exact same content is not a winning strategy. And to be honest, it's baffling to me that this team, who some or all of them used to work for BuzzFeed, and they had many years of being highly successful on YouTube, it baffles me that they didn't understand that this would happen, because generally successful YouTube creators that create entertainment-based content tend to understand that the reason that they're so popular is because their content is free. They tend to understand that they couldn't compete with something like Netflix. And yet these guys clearly decided that they could compete with Netflix, and it did not go well for them. And I actually watched part of the video that they put out when they announced this decision. And it wasn't just the fact that they were planning to put the type of content that they had previously put online for free behind a paywall. It was also a lot of things about the attitude behind it. For example, they justified the decision by claiming that their content is higher quality than the rest of YouTube. And while there may be some legitimacy to that, because I think that they do a lot more fancy camera work and editing than most YouTube channels, that doesn't really justify putting your content behind a paywall, especially when it's just the same type of content that people are used to getting for free. And probably the most tone-deaf part of the entire announcement was when they said that they had chosen to make it $6 a month or $60 a year because everyone can afford $6 a month. And again, it just baffles me how they could make such a massive unforced error, because anyone who understands marketing or public relations should know that, first of all, when you're talking about an additional entertainment service, like, it's safe to assume that most of their viewers probably already have a Netflix subscription or an Amazon Prime subscription or some other form of entertainment streaming service. So unless you're saying that your streaming app would be good enough to replace Netflix, you're asking people to spend an additional $6 a month, not $6 a month that they're already spending. And for some people who are struggling to make ends meet, while they might be able to technically afford $6 a month, it's just not going to be worth it. It's not going to be worth the extra stress, and it's not going to be worth paying for something that they used to get for free. They also defended the idea by pointing out that all of their pre-existing content would remain on YouTube for free, but that is kind of irrelevant because, I don't think that their content has a massive amount of rewatchability. It's not like your favorite TV show from 10 years ago that you might want to rewatch. Their videos, from what I understand, are interesting and well made, but not necessarily the kind of thing where you're going to go back and rewatch their entire catalog. And the backlash to this was massive. They lost 100,000 subscribers within, I think, 48 hours. and they got absolutely ratioed in the comments. And the backlash was so swift and so severe that they did backtrack almost immediately. And their compromise was that they would still have their $6 a month streaming app, but that they would also upload their content to YouTube for free a month after it's published on the streaming service. And they also said that they would give free access to the streaming service to anyone who had previously been a Patreon supporter. And I've got to be honest, I do not understand why they didn't just do that in the first place. Like, the way that they actually framed this offer initially was kind of like, we're so much better than everyone else on YouTube that we're just going to make you pay for our content now. And you have no choice. This is what we're doing. So, of course, it had a lot of backlash. Their fans did not like that at all. And then within like 48 hours of getting all this backlash, they were able to come up with a much better idea and a much better offer. And I think this just shows that this team, who had been very successful for a very long time, were existing in kind of a mini echo chamber where I seriously doubt that they ran this idea past anyone who was not in their immediate circle. And so when you have a team of like 3 or 4 or 5 people that make up the leadership of your company, and then maybe you have like a small support team, and you don't tell anyone other than your best friends and the people who are employed by you this new idea, well, there's a very good chance that even if someone realizes it's not a good idea, they're not going to tell you because they might be afraid that you won't be open to their feedback. But really, if these guys had just run this idea past like a business development professional, or even like maybe a segment of their audience, like maybe floated the idea to their Patreon subscribers, and instead of saying, this is what we're doing, you have to pay for our content now, if instead they had just gotten in touch with some of their biggest fans and said like, hey, we want to start a streaming service. What do you think of that? What should it look like? Asked some questions, done some market research. This could have been a massive launch that would have had a huge positive impact on their business, instead of costing them 100,000 subscribers and having a massive negative impact. This next example is called the Humane AI pin, and it was initially marketed as an alternative to a smartphone or alternative to the iPhone. I believe the team behind it includes 1 or more people who used to work for Apple developing iPhones. So it seems like they thought that they could create something better or just as good as a smartphone that would be more convenient, maybe a little bit cheaper, and that people would love even more than they love their smartphones. But ultimately, this was a massive marketing failure on top of a massive product market fit failure, because they labeled this wearable device in their marketing as a iPhone replacement, as something that would be just as good as your smartphone, but more convenient and easier to use. And based on the real reviews that people made about it when it came out, it is not even close to being that. It seems like it's basically the equivalent of having a fairly heavy button clipped to your shirt, and it pretty much works like an Amazon Alexa or a Google Home device, where you talk to it and an AI voice responds. And it sounds like it technically can do a decent amount of the same functionality as a smartphone. But the issue is, people don't just like smartphones because they can do a lot of stuff. People like smartphones because they can do a lot of stuff very quickly, very easily, and very conveniently. And this AI pin does not do things as quickly as a smartphone, and it is much, much less convenient. So the main way that you would interact with this pin would be by talking to it, because it doesn't have a keyboard or a screen interface or anything. So you would have to give it verbal commands. And if you have an Alexa or a Google Home device, you know that even with good AI, the AI doesn't always hear you correctly. Sometimes it'll do something you didn't want it to do. Sometimes it'll ignore you. So you have to give it verbal commands, and then you have to wait while it thinks and researches, and then wait for it to respond very slowly in its AI voice. And they also have some sort of a laser on the front where you can put your hand in front of the laser and it will show text on your hand in laser letters. And this was pitched as something that would be really convenient, really easy, super futuristic, and ultimately it just didn't work. In the review video that I saw, it looked like it was extremely difficult to even get the text to be legible. And for most people, your palm is going to be about the same size or even smaller than a smartphone screen. And it's obviously not going to be as easy to read because the lettering and the screen on a smartphone is very flat, it's very precise, it's very sharp, and your hand is covered in wrinkles and lines and everything, and it's going to be hard to get the angle right. So that just wasn't a great idea, and it seems like they probably didn't test it nearly enough before they started saying that it worked really well. And also, although the device is definitely smaller than a smartphone, it looks like it's about maybe a little under half the size and weight of a smaller smartphone that we have these days. But even so, that is way too big a thing to conveniently clip to your shirt. That would be pulling your clothing down all day. It would get annoying. And it would also be a high risk of like falling off or getting damaged in some other way. Like, you go through a door and it bangs on the door and oh, there you just wasted $800. And so I really think that their biggest issue was the fact that they tried to create something that the technology we have just isn't ready for. Like if this thing did everything that they wanted it to do and it was lightweight and awesome, would it be a good idea? Yes, of course it would. But I just don't think the technology was there. And they tried to make it anyways, and then they marketed it as if it was everything that they could dream for it to be, and it just wasn't that. So there was a ton of marketing hype around this. They were showing demonstration videos that made it look like it worked a lot better than it did. They went on big news shows and claimed that it was a perfect replacement for the iPhone. And then when it actually came out, no one liked it. It got terrible reviews. There was actually one review on YouTube where I can't remember the name of the channel, but it was a guy who reviews all types of tech devices, and he said it was the worst product he had ever reviewed, and I believe that. And so this is just a really clear example of focusing way too much on an idea and on over-promoting that idea instead of creating a really good product and promoting it with accurate marketing. The next two examples we're going to look at are both films that came out in 2024. And this is why I said that there's a bonus, because technically we're looking at 6 examples, but 2 of them are films, and we're going to go through them quickly together right now. So the first one we're looking at here is The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which had a $60 million budget, but grossed only about $27 million worldwide at the box office. And because marketing budgets are typically not included in a film's listed budget, usually at the box office, films are looking to make 150% to 200% of their budget back in box office sales. And this film did not even crack 50% of the budget. So that is very bad. And that's surprising because they actually have a decent amount of star power in the cast. We have Henry Cavill, who's famous for playing Superman as the main character. We have Alan Ritchson, who became very well known as Reacher in the Amazon Prime series. Cary Elwes, I'm not sure how to say his name, but he's been in all types of stuff. Elsa Gonzalez, I'm not super familiar with her, but she did a great job, and I think she's fairly well known as well. And I actually watched this after it came out on streaming, and it's a really good film. It's actually, personally, I don't go to the cinema very much. I don't really like going to movie theaters. But if they had promoted this movie better, I actually might have gone to the cinema to see it, because it's my type of film. I love this type of high-octane action film. I also like Henry Cavill and Alan Ritchson. They've both demonstrated that they're good actors and that they can perform very well in action scenes. And the movie is actually quite good, in my opinion. And yet, it really flopped at the box office. And I did see some people suggesting that the reason it didn't do well at the box office was that it released at the same time as more popular films, and that it didn't have a very long box office run. But I don't think that those really account for much, because the films that released at the same time of it also didn't do that well. And I don't think there were any other action films that it was competing with. And if it had been doing well at the box office, they could have extended the box office run. So the fact that they cut the box office run short means that it probably wasn't doing that well, and they just wanted to cut their losses. And I really think that they just didn't promote this film enough. I think that with it being such an impressive action film and having guys like Henry Cavill and Alan Ritchson heading it up, I think they could have gotten a lot of comic book movie fans with Henry Cavill. I think they could have gotten a lot of Reacher fans with Alan Ritchson. And I actually wasn't aware that this movie existed at all until it was already out on streaming, and the Critical Drinker reviewed it on his YouTube channel, and that is when I learned that the movie existed, and he said he liked it, and I have kind of a similar taste in movies to him, and the way he explained it made it seem good, so then I watched it on streaming. But again, I couldn't go see it in the cinema because I didn't even know it existed. I think the main failure here is that even though it wasn't a super expensive movie, right, it had a $60 million budget, which is not a ton these days, but considering they had Henry Cavill and Alan Ritchson in the cast, I'm guessing that a significant portion of that $60 million probably went to the actors' salaries. And if you're going to put big name actors like these in a film, you really need to promote it enough so that the fans of these actors know that the movie exists. And so that's kind of a quick one. I think the main thing here is that they invested too much in making a good movie and in getting the right people in the cast. And then they didn't invest enough in letting the fans know that the film existed beforehand. The other film that we're looking at here is Madam Web, which is a Spider-Man universe film that was released by Sony. And I believe this film actually grossed $100 million internationally on an $80 million budget. So technically the international gross exceeded the budget. However, as I mentioned, marketing costs are generally not included in the film's budget, and they actually promoted Madam Web quite a bit. So they probably spent a decent amount on advertising. And also, the reason that I said earlier that they typically need to make at least 150% of what they spent in the budget is because the box office gross doesn't all go to the film company, right? The cinema takes a cut. A lot of it goes elsewhere. Earning only $100 million worldwide on an $80 million budget means that this film almost certainly was at a loss. And from what I understand, they were hoping that they would get some sequels out of this, but I don't think that there are any plans in the works to actually do that because it just wasn't popular enough. And I think the biggest fail here was that the marketing of this film presented it as an action-heavy superhero thriller, but it was really more of a comedic mystery. And that is illustrated really well in the comment section here. So I actually watched this Madam Web trailer. It's a 3-minute long trailer, and like 80% of the trailer is action scenes. And according to a number of people in the comments, they basically put every action scene in the film into the trailer in order to make it seem like it was an action film. And then people who went to the theater expecting it to be an action film were disappointed because that's not really what it was. Also, the action is not good at all. It was painful to watch. Like, it reminds me of a 90s B movie. It didn't look real at all, and that's what you can expect when the main cast is 4 women who I don't think any of them had any history of doing action films. You know, it's not like you had Angelina Jolie or Gina Carano or one of these female actors that has a history of doing really well in action scenes. It was 4 women who were all decent actors, but I don't think any of them really had any experience with action. And then the villain was a guy who also doesn't seem to have a ton of experience doing action. So the idea that they would frame it as an action film in the trailer and then just not deliver that in the cinema is, I think, one of the biggest fails here. And you can really see a lot of that in the comments, because in the comment section here, the 2 most upvoted comments are, "Thank you, Sony, for once again condensing this entire movie into a 3-minute trailer that saves my 10-minute trip to the movie theater." And then this one is similar. And when you look at the number of views, it got 30 million views and just over 150,000 likes, and it got way more dislikes than it did likes. So that is not a good engagement rate, not good comments, and it seems like rather than creating the movie that they wanted to make and then promoting it as what it was, they created a film that was something that there wasn't really an audience for, and then they just tried to pretend that it was something that the existing Marvel audience would like, and that just did not go well for them. Now, the second to last example that we're looking at is called Concord. This is a video game that released in 2024, and I'm not really a gamer, so I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the world of gaming, but this project was so ill-conceived that I started hearing about it, I think even before it was released. So let me break it down for you. Based on the sources that I found, this game cost about $400 million to develop over 8 years of development. That alone set it up for failure. However, this game is what's called a hero shooter. So it's a team-based first-person shooter where part of the appeal is that there are specific characters, aka heroes, that you get to play in each game. So you can either have some variety by playing different heroes every time you go into a match, or you can focus on getting really good with one hero and that can become like your main character. The issue is that hero shooters are already a popular genre, and the vast majority of hero shooters are free to play, whereas this game, I think they wanted to charge like $50 or $60 for it, and according to all of the feedback I've seen, it was nowhere near as good as the very popular free hero shooters that already exist. So they spent $400 million over 8 years on a game that is clearly inferior to its competitors, but costs infinitely more because it's like a $40, $50, $60 game competing against games that are free to play. And so I think the biggest fail here is the product market fit. It really seems like they just didn't think about what the gamers that would actually potentially play this game wanted. And this game flopped so hard that it was actually shut down, I think, just a few weeks after it was launched. And as of today, I just heard that Firewalk Studios, which is the studio behind it, has also been shut down. So basically, they paid $400 million to destroy their company. And the last example of a massive marketing fail in 2024 is probably the best known company on the list. It's Kellogg's, which is, of course, the company that's best known for breakfast cereals. The big fail here was them deciding to launch a cereal for dinner advertising campaign in which they suggested that if you and your family are struggling to make ends meet, why not just eat Kellogg's cereals for dinner? And this was not a random blunder. They had an entire advertising campaign based around the idea of, hey, are you struggling to put food on the table? Why not just have cereal for dinner? And the CEO of the company, Gary Pilnick, actually talked very proudly about this advertising campaign on CNBC. I think they were interviewing him just about marketing or what the business is doing in general. And he very, very proudly and happily told the host that they were running this advertising campaign around saying, hey, if you're having trouble buying food, why not just have cereal for dinner? And the host actually immediately pushed back on this idea. He was like, oh, cereal for dinner, that doesn't really sound good to me. And the CEO immediately doubled down on it. He was like, oh, well, it's working very well for us. And he then went on to claim that the cost of a bowl of cereal, including milk and fruit, is less than $1 per bowl, which I don't think that that's accurate at all. Fresh fruit is fairly expensive. Milk these days is fairly expensive. Even their cheap cereal these days is very expensive. To me personally, the most insulting thing about this is the idea that you would compare a breakfast cereal that's basically wheat and sugar to a nutritious meal. The idea that you would even frame that as an alternative is just absolutely inappropriate. And I've actually seen quite a bit of this from Kellogg's in the past couple of years, where instead of innovating and providing better products or healthier products, they are just providing the exact same product as they always have, and they're spending all of their money on advertising to try and make it seem like their products are healthy when they very clearly are not. And I think the CEO should have realized that he made a mistake when the host quickly pushed back on that idea. And you can see in this image, what I did is I did an all entitle Google search. So you put all entitle : and then I have cereal for dinner in quotations. So that means that it would only return results that had cereal for dinner in the title of the page. And there was over 100 stories about this. Here we have from today.com, Kellogg CEO says people should eat cereal for dinner to save money. And then in the meta description, we have the suggestion of eating cereal for dinner sparks backlash. USA Today, shoppers call out Kellogg CEO's cereal for dinner pitch for struggling families. From Axios, Kellogg CEO faces backlash over cereal for dinner. Positioning brand name cereal as a solution to rising food costs is what ignited. And this is the other thing, is that Kellogg's is actually not the affordable option. When I was growing up, my family didn't have a lot of money, and I don't think we ever had Kellogg's cereal unless it was on sale. I typically ate the store brand cereal that was very similar to the Kellogg cereal, but had a slightly different name and was like a couple dollars cheaper per box. So Kellogg's is already not actually the affordable option, and trying to frame it as an affordable option compared to like steak and potatoes and being like, oh yeah, why eat a full nutritious meal that actually has protein and nutrients in it when you can just have a bowl of cereal? It's cheaper. That is just such a tone deaf and ridiculous idea that it could only come from a company that has enjoyed market domination for like, what, 20, 30, 40 years now. And this is kind of the same issue that we had with Watcher, where with the Watcher YouTube channel, they had been so successful for 5 years or however long that they thought they could basically just tell their audience, hey, give us $6 a month if you want to keep watching our content, and people would do that. And guess what? People didn't do that. And it's the same thing with Kellogg's. They thought that because their cereal is so popular and they have such a massive advantage in the market that they could just say, hey, our cereal is just as good as eating a bowl of stir fry. And guess what? It's not, and people did not respond well to that. Those were the 5 worst digital marketing fails of 2024, plus a bonus, of course. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. Did I miss any really massive digital marketing fails of 2024, or are these the biggest examples? And let me know which of these you think was the worst example, and let me know if any of these have managed to sufficiently recover from these marketing fails. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.